The story begins with our main character, lying on a hospital bed, and it seems that he has liked games ever since he was young. He was always in the hospital, so he naturally was also always playing games, which became a significant part of his life. But it's a given that you'll grow tired of something if you do it for too long. It didn't matter which genre of the game he played, the issue was that every game that came out each year was complete shit. The story and world building were all similar and stereotypical. The system had no depth, so because of this, he tries to search for a game that could satiate his need for a well-scripted plot and unique gameplay. That is when he discovered the game named Dungeon and Stone. Unlike other games out there, it forces the players to do 100% of all the work. Its genre was RPG indie game, with a 2D pixel graphics that were hard to come by these days, in their universe at least. But to his dismay, there's only an English version of it, and since English is not his first language, it is a challenge for him, and this game doesn't even really look like his type of game. However, because it is free, he decides to try it out. So after he booted up the game, he was introduced to a variety of classes to choose from, but since he assumed he was not going to play that much with this game, he just chose at random. Unexpectedly, he was so immersed that by the time he decided to look at his clock, it was already late, to which he was surprised by it. With this, he became obsessed with Dungeon and Stone. This game had several charms that could either be considered unique or absolutely shitty. First of all, an NPC teammate is required in the gameplay, and when you die, you have to start all over. At first, it was fun, but later, he was just too stubborn trying to beat the game, and it was such a failed game that there were no tutorials, neither in Korean nor English. Still, however long it took, he was set on beating it on his own. From when he first started the game in the hospital, to when he was drafted to be a public service worker, and then until he was released, to when he went back to university, graduated, went to interviews, got accepted into a company, and to when he was going to and from work, he always continued to play Dungeon and Stone. Entranced with the game, 9 years passed quickly, but finally, he was now at the entrance of the final boss. With this, he proudly mocks the ones who made the game, since he assumes that there is no one else who has gotten to this point. 9 years, he sacrificed his 20s for this. He definitely deserves this W. Now the game asks him if he will enter the boss room, to which he immediately picked yes, but another caution message appeared, informing him that he might never come back if he entered, which he felt an ominous aura to it. Still, it is just a game for him, so he believes that it would not hurt to try, and he wouldn't have got to this point if he didn't want to challenge the boss just because of a sudden feeling. So he accepts to enter, while he doesn't expect to win on the first try anyway. So he plans a strategy to gather the most information he can. That was why he was late to catch on to what was happening. And to his surprise, the game informs him, via Korean language, that the tutorial has been complete, which surprises him, since he thought the game only supported English. Because of that, he had to work so hard to understand all the English for nearly a decade. Then suddenly, an intense ray of light poured out, with a pain that burned through his body. He lost consciousness, and when he opened his eyes again, he was faced with an unbelievable situation. Torches instead of LED lights, muscly barbarians wherever he looked, and some weird man giving a speech. With this, question filled his mind, while he noticed that this is definitely a language he has never heard before. So how is he able to understand it? And why is he here in the first place? But instead of freaking out, he manages to calm down, in order to understand the situation and gather information. And to do that, he looks at himself first, noticing he has rough hands, tough muscles, and tattoos. He was surprised to have a new body. Then one of the people he was with was called forth by the guy in front of them to pick a weapon for themselves, and be acknowledged as a warrior, which he was all familiar with. And with this, he is certain that he is in the world of Dungeon and Stone, because when he chose Barbarian as his character, this is how the game started. Now he was questioning himself, how the hell did this happen? But before he could find some answers, the guy beside him started freaking out, with confused eyes and a scared expression. The main character noticed he's different from the other barbarians, so he concludes that he is not the only one who's entered the game, and so he's just like him. But unexpectedly, the chieftain was suddenly in front of them, asking furiously who just opened their mouth, and when the chieftain asked if it was him, the main character immediately says no. Therefore the chieftain concludes that it was the guy besides him, and without a second thought, he beheaded him on the spot, shocking the main character immensely. But he knows that he needs to calm down and not show any emotions. If not, he will be dead too. And with this outcome, The chieftain then declares that the man he just killed was possessed by an evil spirit, so he advises everyone to forget about it and continue with the ceremony. With this, the main character got 3 information he needed to further his chances in surviving. First, people like him, who come into the game, are regarded as an evil spirit. Second, you will die if anyone finds out. Third, it could have been his head rolling on the ground, so he concludes that he needs to get through this without being found out. But there is a small problem, and that is, he doesn't know his character's name. With this, he curses at the game, and he knows that he can't just guess when his life depends on it. So in order to know his name, he came up with a plan, and that is to step forward if there's no one showed up in front. After 2 seconds has passed when the chieftain calls a name, he knows the possibility is low, but this is the only way he has right now. It could be some other evil spirit's name, but he decided to leave that to luck. So the chieftain called out Jandel's son, Bjorn, and 2 seconds since the name's been called, no one stepped up. Therefore, he was sure that it was his name, probably, so he went up to the front, only to meet the chieftain's glowing eyes. But his assumptions were correct, so the chieftain gladly tells him to pick his weapon. With this, he confirms that Bjorn is his name. Now he has to make the second important decision. In return for having no talent in magic, barbarians have strong physical abilities. He was going to raise his barbarian as a close combat dealer for starters. So, the weapon he will choose would be a shield. This is the best decision he can make. With this, the chieftain acknowledges him as a warrior, and simultaneously, the system completes its synchronization. He chose the shield since when he first played this race. He chose to go with a great sword because it looked cool, but he died way too much. As he tried different weapons and tested all of them, it was all within the Berserker meta. He noticed the play wasn't very stable since he was always barely surviving in all of his battles. And, one day, he had this thought, asking himself if a barbarian has to be played as a dealer, since barbarians are a race with high vitality and strength. While it might not be as good of a tanker as a dwarf, it still possesses the base for a tanker. He doesn't really like doing this since this combat method needs a lot of training, but it'd be a pity to waste all his research efforts so far. So he gives it a go, and to his surprise, it efficiently manages to clear a level. Now he realized it was an overpowered build. This recent decision is the most rational one that he can make right now, and he knows he won't regret it. Soon after, barbarians that have gone through the coming-of-age ceremony will enter the labyrinth. In order to do that, they'll have to go to the city with a labyrinth, Rafdonia. So when they arrived at the gates, they excitedly charged all together. However, all this excitement all went away as soon as they realized they have lost their way. With this, the other barbarians complain and tells their leader to take responsibility of his lack of judgment, which he admits, and quickly stepped down as their leader, while Bjorn couldn't believe how stupid they were. But with their new leader, who is named Einar, and was easily regarded by their people to be worthy as a leader, Bjorn assumes that she is capable. But to his surprise, they were also lost because of her. With this, the barbarians were in disarray, and are now arguing who is the next leader to choose, since they must arrive at the labyrinth within the designated time. While Bjorn couldn't feel but ashamed to be the same race as this brainless brutes, now he is in deep thought, because if this keeps going, they might never reach the labyrinth. But he doesn't want to attract attention yet, so he came up to a conclusion, and went over to Einar, to tell her how to get to the labyrinth, telling her they just need to follow those guys up ahead, which she happily believed him and tell it to her companions, regaining her reputation as a wise barbarian, while Bjorn couldn't believe what he just witnessed. So with that plan, they quickly arrived at the labyrinth's entrance, but after seeing it with his own eyes, Bjorn was now second-guessing his decision to enter the labyrinth, and to be honest with himself, he doesn't think anyone would realize him leaving the group right now. Not only has he been sick his whole life, he was just an ordinary person who doesn't even have any experience hitting anyone with his fist. Now he asks himself, if someone like him can fight and win against the monsters in the labyrinth, but there is still a tax he is required to pay, because the tax is one of the wicked systems of the game Dungeon and Stone. All citizens of the city need to pay taxes from 20 years old, and they'll be executed if they're unable to do so. Still, there is another way to pay the taxes of Rafdonia other than going into the labyrinth, and that is by working at places like the village bars. But the problem is that he is a barbarian. In this game, a barbarian can't do any normal work. Because of that, the barbarian class is the only one that receives a weapon as soon as they start in the game. If this weren't the case, then he wouldn't have to fight monsters. And the biggest problem is that the labyrinth is only open once a month. If he doesn't go in this time round, He needs to survive in this place somehow for a month. So if he can't get any jobs because he is a barbarian as the game designs, he doesn't have anything to do. Even if he does survive for a month in the village somehow, his conditions will be in the worst possible state. So if he is going to go in, then this is the right time to do so. However, he is unable to get his feet moving, because this isn't a game. His life is really at stake, and as he was struggling to come up with an answer that will guarantee his survival, Einar suddenly approached him, asking him to go together, since the other warriors have already entered the labyrinth, and they are the only ones that haven't gone in, and they don't have much time left because they got here late. With this, he noticed that there are only 5 minutes left until the labyrinth was closed, and the portal was definitely becoming smaller. Still, he told her to go in first, and he will follow right after her. But before she could leave, Einar thanks him for the help he gave her, and then she asks for advice on what does she need to do to become wise like him, because she has never seen a barbarian as clever as him before. To which Bjorn wanted to say that she needs to be reborn again, but he knows he could not say that. Therefore, he decides just to give a vague answer, and so he states that she must always think before she acts. With this, she thanks him again, and states that she will make sure to repay him for his help if she make it back from the labyrinth. Hearing her so unsure, he realizes that they are different from the game, since barbarians are people that don't know fear, but now they don't seem any different in real life. Therefore he asks Einar if she is also afraid of dying, to which she responds that naturally she is, but she has been born as a warrior, therefore she will die if she doesn't fight. Now Bjorn realized that they're the same as him too. They just simply have no choice but to fight, because if they don't kill monsters, they won't be able to survive in this city. That's probably why barbarians learn how to overcome their fear and push forward. With this, he realized how truly amazing they were. And he too is a barbarian, so he decided to enter the labyrinth. Even if he was scared, he has no choice but to do it. Not only does he have a strong barbarian physique, he also have the knowledge that he gained from raising thousands of characters. With this he was sure to survive in this place, and enter the labyrinth in the last second. But after entering the level 1 crystal cave, he was confused since he was teleported in a dark place. Still, he was an expert when it came to dungeons and stone. Therefore he easily came up with a conclusion, based on the game designs. Because there are crystals stuck on the walls of the first level of the labyrinth, there's no real need for torches, so it seems like he is in the darkness region, the place that's on the furthest outskirts of labyrinth level 1, the super rare area that doesn't have light. But the darkness region isn't usually the starting point though, but this is the reality. So nothing's guaranteed, since the starting point is random. It's possible for someone to have their starting point in the darkness region, unlike how it was in the game. With how hopeless his situation is, he tries to open his status window, or any other cheat skill he may have. However, nothing's working as expected, so there's no point staying where he is, and went to step forward. After walking for a few minutes, Bjorn was questioning his speed in which he was traveling, so he was contemplating of crawling, since he assumes it might be faster that way. But before he could do that, a sudden pain surged from his feet. With this Bjorn realized that he was caught in a goblin trap. Still he was smart, so he knows that he needs to endure this, and not let out any sound, because he is sure that a goblin that laid this trap is waiting somewhere near this area. Still thought lingers within him, thinking if it is possible, it's not in the vicinity, and that might be the case. If he is lucky, it might have gone away for a moment, but he knows that such relieved thoughts are the most dangerous ones. He must assume the worst possible scenario if he is unable to be certain of the situation. If there's a trap here, then there must be a goblin near here. Suppose a goblin hears his scream and spots him who got caught in the trap. It will wait for him to lose his strength while waiting in the darkness. This is why he mustn't let out any sound. This is how Dungeon and Stone thinks. In that case, he decides to do what's necessary, so he tries to remove himself from the trap first. But looking closely, he noticed that there's paralyzing poison in this trap. Now he curses at the darn barbarians. If only they had given him leather boots instead of useless sandals like these. But he knows that there is no point of saying all this now, so he stopped whining and get moving. If he needs to fight, then it'd be better for him to do it quickly. So he got out from the trap, but it seems like the poison is spreading, and his right foot has gone numb. He doesn't even feel fear because of the paralyzing poison, which is a good thing. So now that he is out of the trap, he calls for the goblin to show up, but only silence filled the place. Still he didn't give up. He even insults the goblin's mother and its ancestor to try and provoke it, while knowing all this could just be him being paranoid, and there really isn't a goblin here. But even if he is just acting like an idiot here, he is an idiot who survives, and as he walks further, he noticed the bleeding won't stop, and it feels like his brain has been dipped in alcohol. But suddenly, he heard footsteps coming from behind him. With this, he mocks it even more, while concluding that it probably came closer because he was getting further away from it. But, even though he knows it's there, it's still problematic that he can't see it. So in order to make it come closer to him, he decides to increase his speed of running away. With this, he noticed it was following him while maintaining a distance. When he stops, it stops as well. While it's rejoicing as its prey is bleeding away and dying, it's probably waiting for him to slowly die while being scared of its laugh. What a clever bastard. It's not even hiding its own voice now. Still, this does not faze him, and he decides to change plans. So as soon as he goes far enough, he lays flat down in his stomach, pretending that he collapsed just as the goblin wished. But as he was waiting for it to come closer, the goblin decided to throw rocks at him to check if he was dead. With this, Bjorn was annoyed while acknowledging the goblin to be so fucking smart. They're definitely more intelligent as compared to barbarians. Still is acting, convince it to come closer. So as soon as it was about to touch him, Bjorn welcomes it with his fist. However, his reach was too short, but as if his body suddenly moved by itself. Now he can feel vividly where the goblin is moving, and was able to grab the goblin with his instinct alone. With this, he realized that he is now stronger, and this body is different from the sick body that spent its whole life in the hospital. This is the body of a barbarian. After he finished taking out his anger on the goblin, he received 1 experience points. Suddenly, the goblin's body started disappearing, as if this was the game, leaving an item behind. This is a currency that's being used in Dungeon and Stone, a grade 9 magic crystal. Its value is a piece of bread. With this, he could only grin at himself, since this is only what he got for going through all that shit. Now this is definitely the world within the game that he knows of, a place where labyrinths and monsters exist. Dead monsters would leave items behind and disappear. And in the city that's outside, there are familiar game sceneries and other races that live together. But of course, he will never confuse his reality by thinking it's a game. A few moments later, Bjorn was still bleeding, but now he was crawling his way through the labyrinth. It's not like he is a fucking bitch that's fractured. He is doing this to avoid using the injured leg, so it doesn't hurt as much, and he is moving faster than he thought. And the sweetest reward is that he will no longer be stepping on traps. Now other parts of his body are hurting, but he can endure this in order to survive. However, the bleeding won't stop, and this became more dangerous than it should have been. So he knows that he needs to find someone who can help him. Therefore, he believes that, if he keeps heading in one direction, he is sure he will be able to get out of the darkness. But since he is closer to death than ever, he wonders what happened to that guy from earlier. If he died or the guy awakens in his original body. With how hopeless he is, he now understands why humans have religions. In a moment of despair, it provides a distraction, just like him in this situation. After a few moments more, he noticed that it was getting brighter. Now he was sure that his efforts weren't in vain. With this, he was determined to get to a lighter area. He was sure there's bound to be 1 or 2 people who can help him. But as he was getting closer, he started to see a vision of himself, berating him, discouraging him, in every step that he made. With this, he knows that he is really going insane, and his identity keeps splitting into 2, joining back again, and getting dull again. He is sure that this is from losing too much blood. Still, he moved forward, and didn't give up no matter what. And with his efforts, he managed to meet a group of adventurers. However, there is less than 2% remaining of his character's vitality. But because of this, an achievement was accomplished, and as a reward, his mental stat will keep rising by +1. Then the adventurers approached him, but before they helped him, Draus, the adventurers' leader, investigated him first, and since they deduced that he was a novice, they wondered how he got this far, while Bjorn is holding onto his dear life, and was furious because they are just staring at him instead of helping. And as they look down on him, Draus then asks one of his teammates, a priestess named Erzina, if she could treat the barbarian in front of him, which Bjorn could finally breathe a sigh of relief, since he assumes that he was saved. However, this bitch instantly refused, which Bjorn was shocked and confused. But still, the leader got a potion from Patron instead, which Patron wasn't willing to, since he is a cheap bastard, but still he couldn't refuse their leader's request. Now that Draus has the potion, he informs Bjorn that it will hurt a little bit since it's not a divine power. So when he pours it into Bjorn's injured leg, excruciating pain follows, and it feels like his entire body is melting. Now he realized this is the reason they didn't allow someone to use the potion mid-battle. After the hellish pain he experienced, he was now fully healed. With this, Draus asked Bjorn, how did a novice like him manage to get here before them? And if he knew of a secret passage, he would like to purchase that information. With this, he now knows the reason why they helped him, but it's probably for the best, since there's nothing more suspicious than goodwill without reason. And because he was thankful, Bjorn answered truthfully, telling them what happened, and they easily believed him, since Draus read about something like this happening before. Due to the dimensional instability, he heard that someone could fall into the outskirts of the darkness at times, though the probability is so low that it only happens once every 100 years, which Bjorn was pissed that it happened specifically to him. At the same time, he noticed that they had a mage and priestess in this party, meaning they were at least mid to high level, and he just happened to experience something on his first trip that they hadn't even seen before. After gaining the information that they wanted, they left Bjorn, while Bjorn couldn't help but think that it was a miracle they spent this much time on him to begin with, since time spent within the labyrinth is as precious as gold, so he should be happy that he survived, but it felt disgusting to be pitted. Meanwhile, the party of Draus was following the trail that Bjorn had just made, while talking about how lucky the barbarian was to meet them, and it's lucky that he met Draus, instead of Patron, since he knows that there are tons of bastards like him to begin with, so he believes there is no need to help everyone they met, which Patron assumes that the priestess has the same thought as him, but the archer defends the priestess, explaining that if it weren't for the regulations of the temple, she would have healed him, in which Patron tries to reason out that he just met so many who are two-faced, so he can't just trust anyone. The archer then advises Patron that he should really learn a thing or two from Draus, like when he asked if there was a secret passage out of consideration, since barbarians doesn't like receiving help from others, in which Draus was embarrassed to receive such praise. But then they notice that the barbarian's blood trail is still going, but since they are going in another direction, they left the blood trail and went through a shortcut. Soon after, they arrived in a spacious place with a tablet on the center, which they were grateful that they are the ones who arrived first. So without wasting time, Draus touched the table, and a portal to the second floor opened. Therefore they decide to go in, but before they could do that, the archer noticed the sandal of the barbarian they have just met. So to look at the path that Bjorn took, the mage cast a light. With this, they were surprised at what they saw. Draus then states that it should be around 15 kilometers to get where they encountered the barbarian. Now they realized how monstrous of a bastard the barbarian they have just met. Even Patron acknowledged Bjorn, and thinking about it now, the barbarian was holding out his right hand towards them, and showed them the magic crystal. Even after crawling that entire time, he didn't forget his trade item, since he wouldn't have had anything else to trade. Now he take back what he said earlier, because such lunatics will not die unless it's a special circumstance. No matter how hard things are or how much agony they must face, they will never treat death as an escape route.